Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing dumper guilt reflection. I provide audio coaching to help people try and get their ex back or get a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Check out my websites for more details. www.dateme.tips. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. So now let's get back into today's podcast, and today we are discussing dumper guilt reflection. If you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you might be wondering if your ex will ever feel guilt. Are they ever likely to reflect on their decision and think to themselves that they made the wrong choice? In today's podcast, I'm going to explain 3 points regarding dumper guilt reflection. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1 is the mirror of life. So when someone looks themselves in the eye, they look themselves in the mirror, they have an opportunity to reflect how their life is going so far. And if when they look in that mirror, they realise that their life has not gone down the route, not gone down the path that they had hoped and envisioned, this is when somebody can start to consider that they have made a bad choice at some stage of their life. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that a dumper who looks themselves in the eye will consider that this is the time that they want to reconcile with their ex. There is more at play than this. But looking in the mirror is key, and looking in the mirror will happen. And if you are a dumpy and thinking, look, will my ex ever reflect on our situation? Will they ever reflect on the breakup? Will they ever consider if they made the wrong choice? Then look, I can tell you right here and right now, this will happen. You can't run away from your past forever. At some stage, you have to acknowledge, accept, and reflect on your past decisions. Now, this could take a different amount of time for every single person. It could be days, weeks, months, years. Everybody will move at their own pace. And generally, people will really start to reflect once they get that inkling that things aren't going the way that they hoped. So most people won't even look in the mirror until they have a slight inkling that things aren't going to look as they would hope. But we need to go back a bit. We need to understand why the dumper has got to this stage. So when somebody ends a relationship, this is because they are feeling a very low level of romantic emotional attraction for their partner. When they was together, when they was in the relationship, both people was very attracted to one another in all ways. And I call this romantic emotional attraction. But for various possible reasons, this attraction level dropped. And once it hit a certain low point, this is when the dumper would have decided to end the relationship. At that moment, they have moved into single life, and they've done this because they believe they will have a more fulfilled life, a chance of more success and stability by being out of that relationship. You've got to understand, for when somebody ends a relationship, it's because that they don't feel like the relationship is working for them. There is at least one element in their life that is not working within this relationship. Often it's multiple parts of their life that they feel that they want to gamble living a single life as an improvement to what they're experiencing right now. So at that stage, after the breakup has taken place, the single person is living a single life. The dumper is living the life that they chose. They are living a single life, and they're going through what I refer to as the single honeymoon period. They are in the honeymoon period of being single. Everything is new, everything is fresh, everything is exciting. During these stages, they are unlikely to be reflecting in the mirror. They are unlikely to be looking in the mirror of life because this is exciting. This is what they chose. This is what they wanted. So as I said at the start of point number 1, the mirror of life is where somebody looks in the mirror physically and metaphorically when they are already feeling an inkling that their life is not going down that correct route. So during the honeymoon period of being single, they will not be doing this because this is what they wanted, and they will be loving the life of new, of fresh, of excitement. But at some stage as they move forward, this life is no longer new. This single life becomes to feel stale. This single life is no longer exciting, and this single life is no longer fulfilling. Very few people find fulfillment after the honeymoon period of being single. Very few people will meet the next love of their life during the honeymoon period of being single. Most people who get into a new connection will see it only last a very short period of time, and this is known as a rebound relationship. If you want to understand more about rebounds, then please remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications on my YouTube channel, because I've gone through many podcasts in depth on the subject. But today we are talking about the mirror of life, and once single life starts to become stale, once people realize that it is not as exciting as it seemed when they first started, this is when they might reflect. And this is why that most dumpers will get to a stage of reflection, because most dumpers will not meet the next love of their life during the honeymoon period. Most dumpers will have to go through a period of reflection, because most dumpers will not meet the next love of their life so soon. So most dumpers will see single life become stale, will see single life become something that they didn't envision. It will become something which is not exciting. It will become something which is like a weight on their shoulders, because their friends and family are probably living their own lives and they feel alone as this life as a singleton. And this is when they will reflect. This is when that reflection will take place. But will they feel guilt, and will they want to try to get their ex back? Well, I will be discussing this in the future points of today's podcast, so please stick around until the end. But point number one is that most people will reflect in the mirror of life, because most people do not meet the next love of their life during the honeymoon period of being single. So now let's get into point number two, and the second point of today's podcast about dumper guilt reflection. And point number two is seeing your pain as they look at theirs. So when a dumper looks at themselves physically and metaphorically in the mirror, this is often when they first begin to understand the emptiness of what they have caused when they ended the relationship with the dumpee. So as I said in point number one, most dumpers will get to the point in their life where they will reflect. And this is the first time they will really start to consider what they've done to their dumpee. This is the first time they will start to consider the emptiness and the pain that they caused when they ended the relationship, because they are now feeling in a similar way. They are now feeling abandoned by life. They are now feeling that the path they were on has not led them to the goal that they hoped. The dumpee felt the path they were on was in a relationship which was going to last long term. The dumper felt the path they were on was after ending the relationship, they would live a more fulfilled life being single and meeting someone new who would fulfill them in more ways than their ex. This has not happened. And this is why in point number two, we start to see the dumper really begin to reflect on themselves and how they treated their ex, the dumpee. Was this decision right? Did they make the right choice when they ended the relationship? Could they have done things differently? Was there a way of fixing and healing that relationship rather than ending the relationship? Because the dumper now sees themselves as having little option. The dumper now sees themselves as walking alone in this single life, which is no longer new, no longer exciting, no longer fresh. Their friends and family are likely living their own lives. They are probably connected with people since the dumper was in their previous relationship, and since the dumper has become single, they're probably having less and less people to go out with into the world, and things start to feel lonely. Now, at this stage, if you're a dumpee, you're probably thinking, well, I don't want them to take me back if they're just feeling pity because they haven't felt better. I want them to want me because they feel attracted to me, not just because I'm the only available option. And this is something important to remember, because the dumper at this stage in point number two is feeling a little bit like you don't want them to. They're starting to feel like, should I have stayed with my ex? Was that the better option? Was that the lesser of two evils? I feel really lonely now. I know as a dumpee you don't want to hear this, But most dumpers at this moment in time, when they are reflecting, will go through that period of where they are thinking of themselves. They are thinking, should I have stayed with my ex? It wasn't really working for me, but it's better than being single, I guess. That is something they will start to consider. But what the dumpee wants to hear is that the dumper really, truly wants them back. They really, truly feel attraction. And the good news for the dumpee is that even though the dumper might be considering whether to reconnect with their ex because they just want something that's better than nothing, the truth of the matter is that the dumper is unlikely to proceed with this thought unless it is true, unless it is genuine, and unless they are feeling genuine attraction for their dumpee. So although it's true the dumper might start to consider reconnecting just for their own basis, the truth of the matter is they are unlikely to reach out unless they feel enough romantic emotional attraction. And in the odd circumstances that they do, things will peter out very quickly. Things won't get very far at all because the dumper will think, oh gosh, what am I doing? I've reached out to my ex, we've had a couple of conversations, but now I'm not truly feeling this. So if you're a dumpee, I would say don't worry about this. Because if things proceed to the point of where you do truly reconnect, where you do form a brand new relationship together, then that in most instances is based on true attraction. Most dumpers will only want to reconnect if they are feeling enough romantic emotional attraction for their former partner. And if there's not enough romantic emotional attraction, if it was done through pity, which very, very occasionally it might, well, this new relationship will break down very quickly. So if your new relationship gets to the stage of where it's months into it, then you can safely say that there is new true attraction involved. So if you're now wondering, well, how can romantic emotional attraction grow in my ex's mind if we're no longer together and I'm not involved in their life? How can they grow this for me? Well, again, I've given plenty of hints, tips and advice on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and you will understand how a dumper can grow romantic emotional attraction for their former partner after the breakup and despite them no longer being in each other's life during this time. But for point number 2, what we need to remember is that once they're looking in the mirror, this is when they will start to consider how they treated their ex and whether this was the right decision. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast on dumper guilt reflection. And point number 3 is guilt depends on levels. So the guilt a dumper feels when reflecting will be based on the level of romantic emotional attraction that they feel for their former partner. When we are talking about guilt, when we are talking about looking in the mirror, this is what I refer to as ignition. And there are 2 main types of ignition. One is a trigger, and we are not talking about triggers in today's podcast, but the other main type of ignition is reflection. And when you are reflecting on your life, when you reflect on your life and it is not going the way that you hoped, that is ignition. That is a huge ignition. And if there is enough fuel, which I refer to as romantic emotional attraction, this is where combustion will take place. And this is where an ex is very likely to reach out to their dumpee. So let's just go over that again. What will connect the dumper to the dumpee at this time? Well, we need to consider how much romantic emotional attraction is the dumper feeling for their ex at this time. And as a dumpee, you're probably worried about this. You're probably thinking, well, if we're not together, then how can I be growing this romantic emotional attraction? They dumped me because it was so low. How can it grow to that necessary high point? Well, I've given hints, tips and advice in lots of other podcasts on my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and you will learn how you can grow romantic emotional attraction in your former partner's mind. So that even if it was very low at the time of a breakup, you can still grow it. Now look, there is no 100% guaranteed way to get your ex back. Not everyone will be able to grow enough romantic emotional attraction necessary for when the ignition to take place, combustion to happen. Remember, in this instance, in today's podcast, what we're speaking of, the ignition is when the dumper begins to reflect on their life not being as great as they hoped. but the ignition will only cause combustion if there is enough fuel, if there is enough romantic emotional attraction. So in some instances, a dumpy will not be able to grow enough romantic emotional attraction. They won't be able to grow enough fuel. And if there isn't enough fuel when the ignition takes place, then sadly, the dumper will not feel guilty. Sadly, the dumper will still be reflecting, but they will still feel that their decision was correct. They will think back and think, oh gosh, I really wish, but I hadn't hurt my former partner. They didn't deserve this. My life's not going so well. I'm miserable. I made them miserable. But at the end of the day, I think I made the right decision. So they will reflect, but unless there is enough fuel, unless there is enough romantic emotional attraction, there won't be combustion, because the reflection, the ignition won't cause combustion, and hence, in that instance, sadly, a dumper will not reach out to their ex. However, if you have grown enough romantic emotional attraction, then when they reflect, and as we said at the very start, most dumpers at some stage will reflect. That is ignition. Ignition combined with enough fuel of romantic emotional attraction creates combustion, and that is when a dumper will feel guilt. That is when a dumper will likely reach out to their ex, and there is an opportunity to grow a new relationship. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and I hope you can see that in most instances, a dumper will at some stage reflect on their life. And if they have enough romantic emotional attraction for their former partner, this is when they will feel guilt, and this is when they will likely reach out. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.
Yeah, if you miss your ex, we can help with that. Help you get him back, or we can help find you someone else. Yeah, Vincent Bo, the relationship coach, giving you some insight, bringing you a new approach. DateMe.tips, go and check the site, giving you advice, helping with your love life. Get your ex back, or move to the next. Ain't no sweat, you know Vincent Bo got you. Finding love ain't no problem. Yeah, DateMe.tips, check it out now.